I never really paid attention to the park bench until the morning I decided to stop running from my own thoughts. It was early October, the kind of morning where the air smells like wet leaves and possibility, and I had just moved back to the city after 3 years away. I'd been staying in my cousin's apartment while I figured out what came next in my life, and every morning I'd wake up before dawn with this restless energy that I couldn't shake. So I started walking to Riverside Park, finding this particular bench that overlooked the water, and I'd sit there with my coffee and just exist for a while. That's where I first saw him. Ashton, though I didn't know his name yet. I just knew that on my third morning there, I arrived at my bench to find someone already sitting on the far end of it. He had dark hair that fell slightly over his forehead, and he was wearing a grey hoodie and jeans, holding a thermos in both hands like he was trying to warm them. He glanced up when I approached, and for a second I considered finding another bench, but something made me sit down anyway. I chose the opposite end, leaving a respectful distance between us. We didn't speak that morning, or the next one, or the one after that, but he kept showing up, always before me, always on the same bench, and I kept sitting down, always leaving that same careful space between us. It became this strange, unspoken routine. I'd arrive around 6:30, and he'd already be there, and we'd sit in this comfortable silence watching the sun come up over the river. I started noticing things about him, small things. The way he always brought the same silver thermos, how he'd pull his sleeves over his hands when it was cold, the fact that he never looked at his phone, just sat there, present in the moment, in a way that felt almost radical in its simplicity. Sometimes I'd catch him looking at the water with this expression I couldn't quite read, something between peaceful and melancholy. And I started to wonder about him, who he was, what brought him to this bench every morning, whether he wondered about me too. 3 weeks passed like this. 3 weeks of silent mornings, of stolen glances, of this growing awareness that something was building between us, even though we'd never exchanged a single word. I found myself thinking about him during the day, wondering if he was thinking about the park, about the bench, about me. I'd catch myself planning what I'd wear the next morning, which was ridiculous because we weren't even speaking. But there was something about his presence that had become essential to my mornings, like the coffee or the sunrise itself. Then one morning in late October, everything changed. I arrived at the bench and he wasn't there. The empty space where he usually sat felt wrong, like a missed heartbeat. I sat down anyway, but the morning felt incomplete. I kept looking over at the path, expecting to see him walking up late, but he never came. And I realized with a start how much I'd come to depend on his presence, this stranger I'd never even spoken to. He wasn't there the next morning either, or the next. By the fourth day, I'd convinced myself that whatever this thing was, it was over before it had even begun. I felt this strange grief for something I'd never actually had. But I kept coming back to the bench anyway, because the routine had become part of me. On the fifth morning, he was there again. Relief flooded through me so suddenly I almost laughed. He looked up as I approached, and this time he smiled. Actually, smiled. It was small and a little uncertain, but it was there, and I smiled back, feeling something shift in my chest. I sat down in my usual spot, and we fell back into our familiar silence. But it felt different now, charged somehow, like we'd both acknowledged that something existed between us, even if we didn't know what to call it. About 20 minutes passed, and then he spoke. His voice was quieter than I'd expected, a little rough from the early morning. He said, "I'm sorry I missed a few days. I was out of town for work." The sound of his voice did something to me. made everything suddenly more real. I turned to look at him and said, "I noticed." Then I felt my face heat up, because that sounded like I'd been waiting for him, which I had been, but I didn't want to seem weird about it. He smiled again, wider this time. He said, "I'm Ashton." I told him my name was Marcus, and we shook hands across the bench. His hand was warm from the thermos, and the touch lasted maybe a second longer than it needed to. When we let go, I could still feel the ghost of his palm against mine. After that morning, we started talking. Not a lot at first, just small exchanges. Comments about the weather, the changing leaves, the boats on the river. But gradually, as November arrived and the mornings grew colder, our conversations deepened. I learned that he was a graphic designer who worked from home, and he came to the park early because he liked the quiet before the world woke up. He learned that I was trying to figure out my next career move after burning out from my last job in marketing. We talked about books and music and the strange loneliness of city life. And with every conversation, I felt myself being drawn further into his orbit. I started noticing other things about him. The way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he really laughed. How he'd bite his lower lip when he was thinking about something serious. The fact that he always smelled faintly like cedar and something else I couldn't quite place. I noticed the way my heart would speed up when I'd round the corner and see him already sitting there, the way I'd feel disappointed on the rare mornings when he couldn't make it. And I started to realize what this feeling was. This warmth in my chest. This constant awareness of him. This desire to know everything about him. I'd had crushes before, even a couple of relationships with women that never quite felt right. But this was different. This felt like standing at the edge of something vast and terrifying and absolutely necessary. The problem was I didn't know if he felt the same way. I didn't even know if he was interested in men. We'd become friends, sure, but every time I thought about pushing it further, fear would grip me. Fear of ruining what we had. Fear of being wrong. Fear of having to face parts of myself I'd been avoiding for years. December came, and the mornings turned bitter cold. We started sitting closer together, gradually closing that original gap between us until our shoulders were almost touching. Sometimes our arms would brush, and neither of us would move away. The physical awareness was constant now, electric. I'd find myself hyper-conscious of every movement he made, every breath, every shift in posture. One morning, when it was particularly cold and snow was threatening in the heavy grey sky, he offered me coffee from his thermos. I said I had my own, but he insisted, saying his was better. So I took a sip, and he was right. It was better. Rich and dark with just a hint of cinnamon. When I handed the thermos back, our fingers touched and lingered, and I looked up to find him watching me with an expression that made my breath catch. "I should tell you something," he said quietly. "I've been wanting to say it for a while now." My heart was hammering so hard I was sure he could hear it. I waited, not trusting my voice. He looked down at the thermos in his hands, then back at me. He said, "I don't usually do this. Come to the same place every day, I mean. I'm not really a routine person, but after that first morning when you sat down next to me, I found myself coming back. Because I wanted to see you again." The world seemed to narrow down to just the two of us on that bench. I could feel the cold air on my face, could see the clouds of our breath mingling between us, but all I could focus on was the vulnerability in his eyes. "I'm glad you did," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I've been coming back for the same reason." Something shifted in his expression. Hope, maybe, or recognition. He said, "Marcus, I need to know. Is this just friendship for you, or is it something more? Because for me, it's more. It's been more for a while now." The honesty in his words unlocked something in me. All the fear, all the uncertainty, all the years of not quite fitting into the shape I thought I was supposed to be. It all suddenly made sense. I'd been waiting for this. For him. For this moment where I could finally be honest about who I was and what I wanted. "It's more," I said. "Definitely more." The smile that spread across his face was like sunrise. He reached over and took my hand, lacing our fingers together, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world. We sat there holding hands on the park bench while the first snowflakes started to fall, and I felt something settle into place inside me. Something that had always been there, but that I'd never quite acknowledged until now. "Can I kiss you?" he asked. And I nodded, not trusting my voice again. He leaned in slowly, giving me time to change my mind. But I didn't want to. I wanted this more than I'd wanted anything in a long time. When his lips touched mine, soft and tentative and perfect, I felt like I was finally becoming myself. The kiss was brief, just a gentle pressure. But it rewrote everything I thought I knew about who I was and what I wanted. When we pulled apart, I was grinning like an idiot, and so was he. He said, "I've wanted to do that since November." I laughed and said, "Why didn't you?" "Fear," he said simply. "I didn't want to lose this. Lose you." "You won't," I said, and I meant it. After that morning, everything changed. And nothing changed. We still met at the bench every morning, but now we'd hold hands while we watched the sunrise. We'd kiss goodbye before heading off to start our days. We started spending time together outside the park too. He'd come over to my cousin's apartment and we'd cook dinner together. I'd go to his place and we'd watch movies curled up on his couch. We'd walk through the city at night, hands in each other's pockets, talking about everything and nothing. I'd never felt this way before. This certain. This right. Being with Ashton didn't feel like trying to fit into someone else's expectations. It felt like coming home to a place I didn't know I'd been searching for. We talked about it one night in January, lying in his bed after making love for the first time. I told him about my past relationships with women, how I'd always felt like I was playing a role, going through the motions of what I thought I was supposed to want. He told me about his own journey of coming out in college, the fear and liberation of it, the way his family had struggled to accept him at first but eventually came around. "Do you think you're gay?" he asked me gently, tracing patterns on my shoulder with his fingertips. "Or bi? You don't have to have it figured out." I thought about it, really thought about it. I said, "I don't know if I need a label right now. All I know is that this, us, feels right, in a way nothing else ever has. I'm attracted to you. I'm falling in love with you. Maybe that's enough for now." He kissed my forehead and said, "That's more than enough." The word love hung in the air between us, acknowledged but not quite spoken directly yet. But I could feel it growing, becoming more real and solid with every passing day. I loved the way he'd make me coffee in the morning, remembering exactly how I liked it. I loved how he'd send me random texts during the day, just thinking of you, or look at this design I'm working on. I loved the way he listened, really listened. When I talked about my fears and dreams and uncertainties, I loved how safe I felt with him, how seen. By February, I'd found a new job, a better one that actually excited me. Ashton insisted we celebrate, so he took me to this little Italian restaurant in Brooklyn that he'd been wanting to try. Over wine and pasta, He reached across the table and took my hand. "I love you," he said. Just like that. Simple and true. I've been wanting to say it for weeks now, but I wanted to wait for the right moment. And then I realized there's no perfect moment. There's just the truth. And the truth is, I love you, Marcus. My eyes burned with unexpected tears. I squeezed his hand and said, "I love you too." I think I have since that first morning you smiled at me. We left the restaurant and walked along the Brooklyn Bridge, bundled up against the cold, my head on his shoulder. I thought about that first morning in October, sitting on opposite ends of a park bench, two strangers sharing space but not words. I thought about all the small moments that had led us here, the gradual closing of distance, the first conversation, the first touch, the first kiss. Every tiny step that had brought us together. The bench became our place. Even as winter turned to spring and the mornings grew warmer, we kept meeting there. It was where we'd started, where we'd found each other, and it felt important to honor that. Sometimes we'd sit in silence like we used to, just being together. Sometimes we'd talk about our days, our plans, our future. Because we were building a future now. Together, one morning in April, almost exactly a year after I'd first sat down next to him, Ashton brought 2 coffees instead of his thermos. He handed me one and said, "I have something to tell you." My stomach dropped for a second, some old fear rising up, but his expression was excited, not worried. He said, "I got offered a job. A really good job with a design firm. The thing is, it's in Seattle." My heart sank. Seattle. That was across the country. I tried to keep my expression neutral, tried to be happy for him, but he must have seen something in my face because he quickly continued. "Wait, let me finish," he said. "I told them I'd only take it if they'd hire you too. I showed them your portfolio, talked about your marketing background. They want to interview you. Marcus, we could go together. Start something new. Both of us." I stared at him, hardly able to process what he was saying. "You did that? For me?" He set down his coffee and took both my hands in his. He said, "I'm not interested in a future that doesn't include you. This past year has been the best of my life. You've helped me understand what love actually means. Not just romance, but partnership. Building something together. I want to keep building with you, wherever that takes us." I kissed him right there on the bench, not caring who might see, not caring about anything except this man who'd somehow become my entire world. When we pulled apart, I was crying and laughing at the same time. "Yes," I said. "Yes to Seattle. Yes to the interview. Yes to building a future together. Yes to all of it." We moved to Seattle in June. We found an apartment together, a small place with big windows that got morning light. We built a life there, together. New jobs, new friends, new routines. But every Sunday morning, we'd go to a park near our apartment, find a bench overlooking the water, and we'd sit there with our coffee and watch the sunrise, just like we used to. Sometimes I think about how easily we could have missed each other. If I'd chosen a different bench that first morning, if he'd decided to sleep in, if either of us had been too afraid to close the distance between us. But we didn't miss each other. We found each other in the quiet of early mornings, in the space between words, in the gradual building of trust and connection. Loving Ashton taught me things about myself I'd been too afraid to explore. It taught me that sexuality isn't always something you figure out in adolescence, that sometimes understanding yourself is a lifelong journey. It taught me that the right person doesn't feel like compromise or trying to fit into a mold. The right person feels like freedom, like finally being able to breathe deeply after years of shallow breaths. We've been together for 3 years now. We still meet every Sunday at our bench in Seattle. We still hold hands while we watch the sunrise. We still kiss goodbye before starting our days. And every single time, I'm grateful. Grateful that I sat down next to him that October morning. Grateful that he kept coming back. Grateful for every small moment that led us to each other. Last week, Ashton asked me to marry him. We were at our bench, of course, on a clear Sunday morning with the sun painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. He said he couldn't imagine spending his mornings with anyone else. He said I was his home. And I said yes, because he's mine too. I never expected to find love on a park bench. I never expected to discover this part of myself in the quiet company of a stranger who became the most important person in my life. But that's the thing about love, I guess. It finds you when you're not looking for it. It shows up in the ordinary moments and transforms them into something extraordinary. It asks you to be brave enough to be honest, vulnerable enough to be seen, and open enough to let someone else in. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, it sits down next to you on a park bench and changes your life forever.